1995. James Bond was dead, not on screen, in reality, 6 years gone. Legal battles, studio wars, a franchise trapped in limbo while the world moved on. The Cold War was over. The Soviet Union had collapsed. And 007? He felt like a relic from another time. Nobody was asking for Bond anymore. Nobody thought he could come back. But then came GoldenEye. And it wasn't just a comeback, it was a resurrection. Faster, darker, hungrier than anything that came before. On screen, pure adrenaline. Behind the scenes, pure chaos. The new Bond almost didn't get the role. The villain was rewritten after a major star walked. One scene, one very specific scene involving a woman's thighs, got rejected by the censors 11 times. And the entire film nearly got shut down by the Soviet military. This is the story of GoldenEye, the film that saved Bond, the women who made it dangerous, and the real war that almost stopped it from happening. Let's start with the man who waited nearly a decade for his shot. In 1986, Pierce Brosnan was on top of the world. He just wrapped his run as Remington Steele. The show was getting canceled. The Bond producers were circling. The timing was perfect. The look was perfect. The buzz was perfect. Brosnan was about to become 007. And then, days before he signed the contract, NBC changed their mind. They uncanceled Remington Steele. Not because they believed in the show, because they wanted to cash in on the Bond hype. And under his contract, Brosnan had no choice. He was stuck. The role went to Timothy Dalton instead. Brosnan watched the dream slip away. Not because he wasn't ready, not because he wasn't good enough, because a TV network wanted one more season of a show nobody was watching. It would take nearly a decade before he got his second chance. A decade of legal battles, a decade of the franchise falling apart, a decade of wondering if Bond would even exist anymore. But when GoldenEye finally went into production, Brosnan didn't miss. This time, he had something to prove. And you can feel it in every frame. He wasn't just playing Bond, he was claiming what should have been his all along. Before she was a Bond girl, Isabella Scorupco was a Swedish pop star, not an actress, a singer. She'd done some modeling, released a few albums in Scandinavia, but Hollywood? That wasn't the plan. That wasn't even on her radar. When the producers were casting for Natalia Simonova, they wanted someone fresh, unknown, someone who could hold her own against Brosnan but didn't come with baggage or expectations. Isabella walked into the audition not expecting much. She barely spoke English fluently. She had no major acting credits. She was a singer trying out for one of the most coveted roles in cinema. But she had something the producers couldn't ignore. Presence. That innocent but intelligent look. The vulnerability that made you want to protect her, and the strength that told you she didn't need it. She wasn't trying to be sexy. She just was. She got the role. And overnight, she went from Swedish pop star to international sex symbol. Here's the thing about GoldenEye. It had a secret weapon, and her name was Xenia Onatopp. Famke Janssen played her like a fever dream. Beautiful, lethal, and completely unhinged. She didn't just seduce men, she killed them. With her thighs, mid-passion, and she enjoyed it. But let's talk about how Famke got this role in the first place. She wasn't the first choice. The producers initially wanted someone more traditionally Bond girl. Softer, more seductive in a classic way. Someone who fit the mold. But Famke brought something different to the audition. Danger. Real danger. She told them, Xenia doesn't seduce men, she devours them. That line got her the job. And once filming started, Famke went all in. She trained like an athlete. Martial arts, weapons training, stunt choreography. She wanted every move to look real, feel real, hurt real. The infamous thigh scene? She choreographed it herself with the stunt team. They spent days figuring out how to make it look deadly without actually hurting anyone. The physics of it, the angles, the raw, disturbing intimacy of it. There's a moment early in the film. A businessman sits frozen in a steam room, watching helplessly as Xenia strangles a man to death between her legs. It's violent, it's sensual, it's disturbing, and it's one of the most iconic moments in Bond history. But the MPAA hated it. When the film screened for ratings, the response was immediate. Tone it down or get an X rating. The producers trimmed frames, softened the sound, changed the angles, submitted it again. Rejected. Again. Rejected. Again. 11 times. The censors rejected that scene 11 times. Director Martin Campbell fought to keep the edge, and Famke fought right alongside him. She told the producers, this is who Xenia is. If you soften her, you lose her. She's not supposed to be comfortable. She's supposed to be terrifying. She was right. They finally got their PG-13. Barely. But the version you see on screen? That's the watered-down cut. Somewhere in a vault, there's a version that goes further, and it'll probably never see the light of day. Famke Janssen created something Hollywood wasn't ready for. A woman who was beautiful, sexual, and absolutely terrifying. A villain who weaponized desire itself, and the censors spent months trying to erase her. They failed. Xenia Onatopp became a legend anyway, and 30 years later, people still talk about her. Not because she was a Bond girl, because she was a Bond nightmare. You remember the tank chase, of course you do. Bond tearing through St. Petersburg in a stolen Russian tank, crushing cars, smashing through statues, plowing through walls like they're made of paper. It's one of the greatest action sequences ever filmed. But here's what you probably don't know. Most of what you're seeing, it's not Russia. The real streets of St. Petersburg were too narrow, too historic, too valuable to destroy. So the production built a replica, an entire fake city on a backlot in the UK. Cobblestone streets, Soviet-era buildings, statues, all built to be demolished. And demolished they were. The tank was real. A genuine T-55 weighing 36 tons, with a functioning engine, and a crew that had no business driving it through a movie set. They rigged buildings to collapse on cue. They lined up cars to be crushed. They choreographed destruction on a scale that would make Michael Bay jealous. It wasn't CGI. It wasn't miniatures. It was a tank, a stunt crew, and a miniature war zone made to look real because it nearly was. The city of St. Petersburg allowed a few wide shots for authenticity. But everything else? That backlot in England. And when filming wrapped, there was nothing left but rubble. Bond had fought wars on screen before, but GoldenEye made you feel the weight of it. The chaos, the destruction, the sheer absurdity of a man in a tuxedo commanding a weapon of war through the streets, and every bit of it was real. Bond films have always had gadgets, but GoldenEye went further. When the script called for a stealth ship and an experimental attack helicopter, the producers didn't build props. They tracked down the real thing, military-grade hardware that wasn't supposed to exist on film. The stealth ship came from Sweden. Its angular, radar-evading design wasn't a set piece. It was functional technology, built for actual naval operations. Getting permission to film it required government clearance, red tape, and more paperwork anyone wanted to deal with. The helicopter was worse. A French Tiger prototype. Still in testing. Still classified. Still restricted. The kind of equipment that doesn't show up in movies, because it's not supposed to be seen by the public. But somehow the Bond team got access. Security was tight. Every shot had to be approved. Every angle monitored. Cameras weren't allowed near certain parts of the machinery. But when those machines appear on screen, they don't just look impressive, they are impressive, tangible, real, dangerous. For once, Bond's toys weren't science fiction. They were borrowed from the future and dropped straight into the story. And somewhere in a government file, there's probably a note about the time Hollywood got access to weapons that shouldn't have been on camera. For decades, Bond fought the Soviets on screen, but he'd never actually filmed in Russia. The Cold War made that impossible. GoldenEye changed that. It became the first Bond film to shoot scenes inside Russia. A major breakthrough, a symbolic moment. The Cold War was over, the Iron Curtain had fallen. Bond could finally walk the streets of the enemy he'd been fighting for 30 years. But it almost backfired. During production in St. Petersburg, Russian officials got nervous. Too many permits, too many restrictions, and when the crew rolled cameras near a restricted military zone, the Soviet army got involved. Guns weren't drawn, but paperwork was. Officials threatened to shut down the entire production, lock up the equipment, kick the crew out of the country. It was a standoff, a real one, not on screen. In a franchise known for spy fiction, this one got a little too real. In the end, diplomacy saved the day. Producers made calls. Lawyers made promises, and filming continued. But for a moment, GoldenEye, the film about a post-Cold War world, nearly got killed by the ghosts of the Cold War itself. Before Ian Fleming was an author, he was a spy. During World War II, Fleming worked for British naval intelligence, quietly, strategically, with a mind built for secrecy. One of the operations he helped plan was codenamed GoldenEye. It wasn't fiction. It was real. A contingency plan, in case Germany invaded Spain, espionage, sabotage. Intelligence networks ready to activate if the war shifted south. Fleming never forgot that name. Years later, when he bought land in Jamaica and started writing the Bond novels, he named his estate GoldenEye. It was there, in that quiet villa by the sea, that James Bond was born. The desk where he typed. The view he stared at while imagining spies, guns, women, and war. So when the filmmakers titled this movie GoldenEye, they weren't just picking a name, they were closing a circle. Paying tribute to the man, the mission, and the moment where fact gave birth to fiction. Fleming had fought a real war, and decades later, his creation would fight the shadows of that same war on screen. The operation left its mark in silence, just like the film. Not long before GoldenEye was set to premiere in Paris, Pierce Brosnan pulled the plug. He didn't blame the theater. He didn't blame the studio. He blamed French nuclear testing in the Pacific. Brosnan, a longtime environmental activist, had spoken out before. But this time he took action. He refused to attend the premiere, asked the studio to stand with him, and within days the entire event was canceled. It wasn't a publicity stunt. It was a statement. In a franchise built on fantasy, on world-saving heroics and Cold War showdowns, Brosnan made Bond feel real. He stood up for something beyond the film, beyond the franchise, beyond the character. And in doing so, he proved something important. Bond wasn't just a role, it was a responsibility. The premiere eventually happened elsewhere. The film became a massive success. But that moment in Paris, that was Brosnan showing the world who he really was. Not just a spy in a tuxedo, a man with a conscience.